Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Point One podcast. Today, in episode 2, myself, Chris Carlos, and my best friend, Mr. Brendan Lee, we're going to tell you how to become the most interesting man in the universe.
Yeah, guys, so we're going to talk for a few practical points, like we did in the first episode, and we're going to begin with how to engage a room. So how to kick off the conversation, make it interesting, and engage your audience.
Absolutely. So, I think we all know that one person that lights up a room. You're at a party.
I know you're it for me, Chris.
You're at a party, it's kind of dry conversation. One person walks in, all the heads turn, and they're just waiting to see what that person's going to say or do. So we both know people like this, Brennan, and they all share similar traits, So
Yeah.
if we really wanted to distill what these people have down into set steps that listeners can just take away and plug into their normal
It's money,
interactions.
guys. It's money.
Yeah, Conor McGregor suits and money.
Yeah.
What would you say if you wanted to distill? We have looked at these people. We're friends with these people. We are these people. Maybe. What would you say if we wanted to break it down in a few steps and cut it really down to the bone?
I think everyone who's like the most engaging person in the room doesn't care what other people think. So they have extreme self-confidence, they have extreme trust in themselves, and that everything that they say they believe is the most interesting thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's a bit like you'll always hear people sort of say to you, oh, just be yourself. And it sounds like such a cliche, and people go, no, because you're probably not that interesting. The thing is, if you're actually that trusting of yourself and that confident in yourself, you will be no matter what you're talking about. So if I was interested in tiddlywinks enough, I could engage people with it.
Sure.
Just by virtue of the fact I would talk about it with such avid interest.
You are interested in tiddlywinks, aren't you? It's your usual Saturday night chat.
It's the
Hey girls.
the sport of kings.
Yeah. So that's all well and good, and I think that's the final point to crystallize out of all of this. It's total self-belief, but if we want to look at it in steps that we can break away or we can pick off, what do we do first? So I think these people, it begins first of all with your first impressions. As we both know, first impressions, they're indistinct. Sometimes it's hard to know. Some people walk into the room and you like them. Some people walk into the room and you have your connotations about them. So I think we'll focus on their conversational skills in terms of first impressions first. Then perhaps we'll look at their style, how they present themselves, and then finally their aura, the more just less indistinct and the kind of the things you can't really put your finger on. But in terms of conversation, presenting themselves, how do these people who are the most engaging people that how do they come across, or how do they engage others?
The most interesting people always come across as very natural. But the ironic thing about that is probably that they have talked to probably the most people. So in a strange way, they've practiced, but it comes across very natural. But it's not hard work because they've just been doing it in their normal day life. But most likely they've spoken to so many people and had so many conversations, they've become so good at just holding a person's attention.
Yeah.
Like I was reading this thing the other day by a guy, John Danaher, who's this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. And he was saying basically that people who have extreme confidence at the end of, like, say, like a Conor McGregor, what people forget though is that for him to have that mental fortitude and self-belief is ultimately he had to do all the hours of practice before that. So it begins as a physical thing. So the first thing you have to do to get really good at engaging an audience is actually go out and have conversations.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing if people are listening to this podcast and want to be very successful, they're probably already there.
Yeah.
So then it's how do you go from having a good conversation or just like interesting people to becoming that guy that everyone wants to hear and talk to?
Yeah.
So the steps there are you look at the people who are the most successful. It's like anything, like sport or like anything. What does that guy do that makes him better at this?
Yeah.
So the most interesting people always walk in and they don't care.
Yeah.
They just don't. They'll come in and they'll start talking about what they want to talk about.
If you give a few personal examples, like when I think back to people that stand out for us,
Mm-hmm.
certainly I know there's been certain individuals who've met youth hostels, and you've been travelling, guys that have phenomenal self-confidence, and as you say, it's through humongous social exposure.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, we met a guy in Vietnam. Do you remember, in a hostel in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Now, not the most highly successful person probably, as he was working in a youth hostel and he was about 40. But
Yeah.
what I would say about this guy was that he was living his idea of the best life ever, and he was also one of the most engaging and self-confident people I've ever met, because he was literally seeing like 100 new tourists a day and just engaging with them in a way like just you wanted to be around the guy.
And I think to make it more practical, the things that I've certainly picked up may only be over the last few months, because I would say, without exaggeration, we have had a lot of social exposure, a lot of interactions, both in business and social world. And I think one of the best podcasts I've heard about this was on Tim Ferriss when Larry King was on a couple of weeks ago.
I spoke about that in everyone as well.
Yeah, so the idea about total presence when you're in a conversation. So I think if you're in a conversation and you're not sure of yourself, or you're not sure that you're engaging your audience, you're constantly thinking about what's going to happen next, what your next story should be, what your answer should be to the question that you haven't fully heard yet. But for anybody who's at the real peak of this, they're so engaged in the conversation. It's almost like a meditative trance where they're only focused on what you're saying.
That's a very good point. I mean, in that podcast, he also said, importantly, that people, in order to get to that phase, have to work at it.
Yeah.
Again, it all comes back to this idea of, like Larry King said, he's always been this really socially outgoing guy, but he noticed that mightn't be the case for other people, and he was like, you might need a bridge in a conversation. So he's like, if that's what works for you, then do it. But eventually, by doing this so often, you'll get to this stage where you're just so attuned to what the other person's saying, you're not thinking about what you're going to say next, you're just like in the moment, and then as soon as they finish, you have the most interesting question they ask them. And then that was another thing he said, and that was talking about not asking people the obvious question, asking them like that intriguing question, that one that other people don't even think they ask, because sometimes it seems so obvious but no one asks it. And I mean, he gave a bunch of different examples about like questions he would ask like famous people, and then you were kind of going, whoa, yeah, you wouldn't ask that straight up. But very, very interesting ideas there.
I find as well there's stock questions that don't engage anyone. So if you're working in an office job, everybody asks you what time you're on to today. Are you on a long day today? What time you finish today? How are you doing anything at the weekend? Whereas if you want to take that a step further, and part of it's maybe from a bit of an NLP background and imparting imagery and things, I listened or read a couple of weeks ago, if you ask somebody very specifics like, are you going on any warm beach holidays this year? Or are you going on any snow holidays this year? Then that imagery triggers something, a bit more visual in them and tends to give you slightly better responses.
Like, we're not saying every day in the office you should be asking people to engage. Saying
no.
It is okay to ask them the time sometimes.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, what Chris is saying is perfectly right. I mean, you do want to be engaging people's imagination almost.
Yeah.
It's because if a person's sitting in a conversation and it's just coming down to them going, when's this going to end? Instead of them thinking, whoa, what's that? Ask me, what do I say to that? You really want them to be thinking.
Yeah. But I think even that can be a bridge sometimes. I think when you really get to the top level of this, your true presence of mind. And for me, I find that's more when you get into a conversation. Sometimes the difficult part is getting into the conversation. So maybe we should talk a bit about that. How to interest in people. If we're talking about conversational skills, how do they get to that stage where they're in the conversation, where you're present in your thought? What do you think about the approach to the conversation? For example, business conference in a hotel, you don't know anyone. What do you think is your best strategy? You walk into the room.
Well, I think a lot of the time when you're meeting new people, or anyone for that matter, it's really it can be an initial awkwardness.
Yeah.
And that can throw a lot of people. So if you go up and say hello it's probably the first 30 seconds you need to make it through in order
Yeah.
for the conversation to really take hold.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in those first 30 seconds will be going, oh God, this person thinks I'm weird. Why am I still here? I shouldn't have started talking to them.
Yeah.
Now I look weird.
And this happens, I think, a lot for amateurs and professionals alike. Even a lot of very successful people find at random networking events that it's difficult to engage. But I think the key thing with networking, with business, with majority of the social interactions that our listeners will be having, these are what I would describe as warm events. So you're engaging with people who want to meet you. And it's always really important to remember that in a conference or in a networking event, people are there to engage. It's not as if you're in a bar, you're walking up to someone in the street where it's a different scenario. You know, these are people that are from the same.
They're there for the same purpose. They're there to meet new people, make new contacts, and Exactly. But then when you are in situations where it's not such a warm and cozy environment, and the same principle still stands a lot of the time, is that you will have that initial awkward phase. Yeah. And it's training yourself to get over that, to not worry about it and
take action.
Yeah. It's a bit like we're going back to that whole idea of being present, just being in the moment and not worrying about what that person's thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be cognizant. Like you have to be somewhat socially attuned. You can't just say whatever you want and then think that that's okay. But at the same time, you have to be confident enough in what you're saying and not worry.
You can get to the stage, and we both know that once you've overcome that awkward bit of presence, but if you put across this most interesting man in the room persona, a lot of the times you can say whatever you want and nobody will say anything about it.
Yeah, well, that's true, but I think you have to almost fake it till you make it. So a lot of people, in order to get to that stage, will have to go through a phase where they'll probably feel internally that awkwardness, but externally you have to project otherwise and act like you don't. And then eventually you'll start getting in occasionally to like this feeling of like a flow state where you feel like nothing can go wrong, you can say anything, and everyone's smiling, everyone's laughing, it feels fantastic.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you'll come out of that state and you'll be like, whoa, why is this happening?
I think that sometimes as well at the extreme ends of the spectrum that we have seen recently, regardless if you are in that flow state, if you become too ridiculous with conversation topics or the flow of the conversation, even regardless of how present you are, people will kind of be like, well, what is this about,
I know, I mean, you can have people in the palm of your hand and then just say things that are just wee bit too far.
We'll not go into any more of that.
Chris knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so if you email in, we'll maybe explain that story to you. So we've approached the approach, basically, to summarize all that, the approach, just get involved in the conversation, stay present in the conversation, for the conversation, then reflect probably, I think, on your real life experiences. Frequently, I know starting out, you have stock stories you tell. It may or may not be true, it may be exaggerated, and I think as you were saying that as a crutch, maybe some of our users still do that, have the stock jokes, the stock stories. But I think at the really high end of these things, the top 0.1% of these things, you're reflecting from true experience. And the only way to get true experience is to go out and really live life, I think. So travel, get into crazy circumstances. How do you get into those circumstances? Well, probably by attending a lot of social events and indulging in alcohol, I would suggest, which may or may not be frowned upon by the rest of the self-development community. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, to be the most interesting man in the world, ultimately, it requires you to have life experience. Nobody wants to hear about the guy who sat in this room and watched Game of Thrones season 1 through 6.
Drinking green smoothies.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. No, joking, guys.
The Ice Dragon.
We're going to get so much hate mail.
Yeah, so I think that kind of really summarizes or encapsulates what I would put forward as being the conversational side of things.
Yeah.
I suppose we could break this down really. We've looked at the conversation. What about the style and the first impressions of the style when people come into a room? What would you make about that?
I think they come across as different. Yeah. So a lot of people, for safety's sake, will go with sameness. They'll try to fit in.
Beige.
Yeah. They try to be the same as everyone else.
Beige might be a bit out there now, actually. Maybe beige in the 1990s.
Might throw people,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the term that's been thrown about is peacocking,
Yeah.
and it sounds a bit ridiculous because it gets used a lot for guys who are in the pickup or things like that. But it isn't. It isn't going out in tight leather pants and that ridiculous. It's just standing out a wee bit,
Yeah.
doing things that are individual to you.
Yeah.
So whatever's individual to you, but doing it with a level of I don't care.
I think that something I heard a couple of weeks ago about first impressions as well. It's really important to notice that your first impression isn't when you first approach a crowd in work or when you first say hello to someone.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, if you're sitting in a bar, you're sitting in work, your first impression is as soon as somebody opens the office door and walks in, regardless if they speak to you or not, you
Yeah.
already have an impression made on them.
Yeah.
So it's that initial, how someone carries themselves. We're not going into the details of body language, I'm sure most of the listeners know, but confident body language, a breaking tonality kind of tone, that almost swagger that people carry off. And that's the first impression walking into your room that really radiates out. It's not so much that, walking in saying, hello, my name is. So it's really, you have to be quite cognizant and keep it in your mind that you're making your first impression as soon as you open your door into that event, if not when you're walking past in the window.
Yeah.
I think that's very important as well.
No, you definitely need to keep in mind. I mean, you need to, if you're talking about like a work environment or anything like that, you need to be suited and booted and come dressed professionally, but at the same time with your own wee bit of style, and then have that natural sort of swagger about you, which mightn't be too natural for some people at the start, but you work at these things and you get better at them.
And I think there is, I know maybe a lot of the listeners have this already, but I think there's value in fake it until you make it, not going overboard.
100%. Yeah.
But unless you try these things and push and push and push,
I think that's a huge point is pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a chance you will overdo it, right? And it'll turn into a funny story most likely, unless let's not go and see in here, guys. But you can push boundaries. We're talking about doing something a bit silly, maybe is pushing the boundary, and then you go, right, that was too over the top, and then rein it in. But the thing is, when you're trying these things, and if you're acting in the way that we're setting forth, like being this interesting guy, a lot of the time, even your feels will come off well. It's the wee nerdy guy in the corner who never talks to anyone, and then he tries something a bit out of the box, and people judge him so harshly for it. Whereas that guy who's trying and is already this confident guy comes across as it, at least when he does something and sort of feels, people go laugh it off and sort of go, "Did you see what Tim did?" It's a funny story.
Yeah. The thing about it is, because of that, it's a self-perpetuating cycle as well. So if you are this confident character with a swagger, if you go out at the office party, Christmas party, you get blacked out drunk, you're sick of yourself, people are like, oh, you went hard, Tim. But as you say, if you're that guy that never goes out, you're the guy that sits in the corner, or you're the person who doesn't socialise, and that happens to you, goes around the office the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's really in your interest to push yourself into the stratosphere of what's acceptable and really ride the razor edge of it, because the more you ride it, the more you get sharpened to it as well.
So it's an important point as well that you need to be able to laugh at yourself, because you will have hiccups on this journey to trying to be more interesting.
Yeah.
And certainly you'll have your downfalls at some point, but if you can laugh at it, because that's what it's going to be. Like, you have to think like that's just a funny story. That's all it is now.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt you in the long run.
Yeah. And the thing about it is as well, I think the importance of this when you are pushing those boundaries is having extreme self-awareness.
Definitely.
So at the end of the day, you know what, if you get blacked out drunk and you try and kiss somebody at work, you're sick of yourself, as long as you haven't done something ridiculous, at the end of the day, everybody's been there, everybody's done it. And as you say, it'll be another story.
Has everyone been there, Chris? Got some stories you want to share with the audience?
No. Not tonight. Not tonight.
Well, is there anything else we have to talk about? So we've broken down the conversation, the physical behaviour. Is there anything else?
I think the last thing is that they probably both tie into this aura, and I think we're touching upon it there about riding the edge of the sword. But if you're become this, the most interesting man in the office, in business, in your group, you do develop this self-perpetuating aura where you can really say or do anything.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that is essentially what we were sort of
Mm.
harkening there to, is this idea of when you achieve that sort of status, you can get away with so much more. So this aura that you project outwards will only benefit you.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, that is the last piece of the puzzle. That sort of comes from having
Mm.
this ability to generate these conversations and this like way of carrying yourself. That aura will come with that. It's probably the last piece of the puzzle, but it's one when it comes that sort of completes the picture.
The thing about it is, what drives the aura, though, I think, is having only good intentions.
Mm.
So if you're doing these things in an effort to try and get more social status and trying to do it from a business point of view, it'll never work.
Mm.
But if you go out with the intention of having genuinely good fun, of pushing yourself to be a better you, of taking action without expecting any returns from it, I think that's what really lies under all these things, because people can see that if you're doing these things in terms of making yourself
Yeah.
just a better person and more interesting, they'll run along with it.
Yeah, a lot of the time we don't give people credit for how perceptive they are, but a
Yeah.
lot of people are quite perceptive and they do see through people doing things for creepy or selfish reasons
Mhm.
or trying to climb some social ladder.
Yeah.
When people see you doing stuff and they're like, he's really making an effort at this or
Or
doing
he's doing
that.
it because he wants to
That's
do
it.
that.
Yeah, for himself, like just to achieve something. He's
Yeah.
not doing it for some devious repurpose,
Yeah.
Machiavellian,
Yeah.
with the mustache twirling it in the corner.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, I think really that sort of brings a wrap to everything we've been speaking about. This idea of like having then this good aura,
Yeah.
and together with the physical
Mhm.
and the conversational aspects, yeah, it's kind of how you become the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah. So just to summarize, guys, we love distilling the points down for you. We love boiling everything down and cutting through all the bullshit that's out on these sort of podcasts at the minute. So
Mm-hmm.
our 5 or 6 takeaway points would be, work on conversation. Regardless of how good you are, you can always be better. Conversation comes from life experience. Conversation comes through delivery and the use of language and positivity.
Yeah.
In terms of your style, you want to be something, push the boundaries, do something a little bit different. Don't be the black suit, black trousers man. And remember, your first impressions begin before you even say hello. And then finally, if you tie all those things together with a real undercurrent of positivity, self-amusement, and just a drive to make yourself better without any other self-seeking ambitions, you'll develop the aura of the most interesting man in the world. So we're happy to take questions on that. Please tweet us and get us on Instagram, hashtag the Point One Podcast. Check out our Facebook page. And
Yeah, so our email is point1podcast@yahoo.com. Our Twitter is @point1podcast, and the Facebook is
Point One Podcast.
point1podcast as well. So yeah, any questions, guys? Be glad to take them and hear what you guys have to say. Any feedback, much appreciated. Any questions, much appreciated. So signing off, that's Chris Carlos and Brendan Lee.
See you again next week, guys.
See ya.
Bye.